to the Spirit Podcast.
Welcome back to Truth and Fire, where we walk the line between the hidden and the holy. I'm Beck, and tonight we're not just crossing a threshold, we're stepping into places that were once sacred and no longer are. This is an episode about inversion, not the obvious kind, the silent kind, the kind that wears holy robes but drips with something else. Across the world, sacred sites hum with old power. Stone circles, natural altars, monoliths, ley line crossings, ancestral temples. Some still radiate what they were built to hold, but others, something darker has nested there, twisted there, claimed what once opened heaven and turned it sideways. Inverted temples. Some are physical, some are energetic, some are relational, but all of them share one thing in common. They pull you in and drain the fire you brought with you. So, tonight we go into those places and we ask the question the spirits never want you to ask. What happens when the sacred is stolen and used against us? Because this isn't just about ancient temples or overgrown altars. It's about what happens when the structure remains, but the spirit has been replaced. When the symbols stay intact, but the current running through them has been flipped. You might feel it standing in a tourist-packed cathedral. You might feel it at a concert stage that mimics sacred geometry. You might feel it in a relationship that once felt holy, but now feeds on your light. The inversion doesn't always announce itself. It whispers, it mirrors, it mimics. And by the time you realize what you're standing inside, you've already passed through the gate. Our ancestors knew how to build with energy, not just with stone and soil, but with placement, alignment, intention. Sacred sites weren't just chosen, they were listened for, built where the earth breathed stronger, where ley lines crossed or waters sang beneath the ground, where the sun struck a certain way during solstice, or stars gathered in a pattern, echoing something eternal. Stone circles, dolmens, mounds, pyramids, temples etched with codes, each one a transmitter, a receiver, a resonant gate between dimensions. They were built to harmonize, to open, to protect, to connect, but the blueprint still exists, and not everyone who finds it honors the original purpose. Because a structure is not sacred by default, it is sacred by current, by flame, by what flows through it. And once that flow is reversed, the same symbols that once healed can be used to bind, drain, claim. So how does it happen? How does something meant for light become a siphon? It begins with misalignment. A symbol removed from its context, a site no longer activated with pure intent, a ritual performed by those who don't understand the cost, or worse, those who do. You see, inversion isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's replication. The form is copied, the symbols are reused, but the current is flipped. What was once a place of offering becomes a site of extraction. What once healed the body or opened the spirit now binds the psyche or fractures the soul. It happens in architecture. It happens in ceremonies. It happens in relationships, those built like temples, until something enters that turns the altar to ash. The inversion doesn't require brute force, only consent through confusion. You say yes to the wrong frequency and it begins to feed. And here's the hardest part. Inverted temples often feel sacred. They mimic the sensation. They give a counterfeit peace until something in you starts to dim, and you don't remember when you last felt whole. Not all temples have been inverted. Some remain untouched, or buried, or sleeping beneath centuries of silence, waiting for the right ones to return. You can feel it when you're near one. It hums. It breathes. It doesn't demand. It invites. You don't leave drained. You leave aligned. And these sites are often hidden in plain sight, a wellspring in the middle of nowhere, A cave marked by ancient handprints. A grove no one speaks of, but animals gather in silence. The original grid still pulses in places. It might be fractured, interrupted, interrupted by war, concrete, ritual misuse, false idols, but the earth remembers, and the old symbols are waking up to call back those who can carry the right frequency again. You don't need a passport. You don't need a priest. What you need is permission from your own fire. Because sometimes the grid doesn't respond to knowledge, it responds to remembrance. Not all temples are made of stone. Some are built from memory, some from promises, some from love that once felt holy. A mentor, a home, a sacred circle, a relationship that felt destined, but somewhere along the way the current shifted. The light dimmed, and the warmth you once felt turned to depletion. You kept showing up, kept kneeling at the same altar, but the energy changed, and instead of being renewed, you began to shrink, doubt, numb out, fragment. This too is inversion. When something once sacred becomes parasitic, when a place, a practice, or a person begins to feed on you, not walk with you, these are temples turned sideways, false sanctuaries, echoes of what they once were. And the hardest part, we blame ourselves for not being strong enough, for not praying harder, for not being aligned. But it was never your fire that failed. It was the temple that changed its current while still wearing the veil of holiness. The good news is this: inversion can be reversed, but not by force, not by rage, not by lighting every torch and charging the gate. It begins with discernment and then with flame. To reclaim a sacred space, whether it's a physical site or a spiritual practice, or a place inside your own life, you must first name what changed. Where did the current flip? When did you stop feeling nourished and start feeling drained? Once you see it clearly, you don't need to destroy the structure. You only need to clear the frequency. Sometimes that means leaving. Sometimes it means cleansing. Sometimes it means burning the altar to ash and building a new one with your bare hands, because you are the current now. You are the carrier of the original light, and wherever you stand in truth, the grid realigns. You don't need to beg the old temples to remember. You only need to embody what they were originally built to honor. Let the inversion tremble, let the false sanctuaries empty, and let the true ones awaken, wherever your fire dares to return. Reclaiming the sacred isn't always loud. It's not always about confrontation. Sometimes it starts in silence, in the moment you withdraw your energy from what no longer feeds your soul. And that, too, is a cleansing. Because every inverted temple thrives on one thing: your participation, your time, your attention, your reverence misplaced. When you stop offering what is holy to what has become hollow, you begin to shift the field. And this can look like leaving a spiritual group that once felt like home, but now feels like performative or parasitic. Letting go of a belief system that taught you to shrink in the name of obedience. Ending rituals you once loved, but now feel lifeless. Speaking aloud what has been draining you, naming it without shame. Returning to ancestral practices that were burned, hidden, or forbidden. And sometimes it means nothing external changes, but inside you, something lights again. That flame is remembrance, because the deepest inversion is amnesia. When you forget what the sacred was meant to feel like, when you forget what it feels like to be in union with what you serve. So if you're cleansing an inverted temple, begin here. Call your fire back out loud. Reclaim every ember. Walk the structure in your mind. See what no longer belongs. Breathe your truth into it. Refuse distortion. And then bless what's left, if anything remains. And if nothing does, let it fall. Some temples are meant to crumble, and in the ashes, something new takes root. Well, I've got you here. Every Friday, I post a YouTube only series called The Beyond Files, where I dive into some of the strangest clips from the internet: haunted hospitals, time traveler glitches, cursed objects, the usual. But if you're looking for something deeper, something encoded just for the ones walking the flame lit path, I've launched the Signal Path. It's a private tier over on Coffee where I share short, powerful weekly audio transmissions. These are the recordings I don't post anywhere else. They're raw, sacred, and just $5 a month to unlock. So if you want to go deeper with me, head to the link in the description or visit coffee.com/to the spirit. Thanks for listening, and thank you for walking this path with me. Here's the thing about inversion. It doesn't always destroy the sacred. Sometimes it just replaces it. It mimics the shape, it copies the sound, it replicates the symbol, but the current, it's not light, it's hunger. And in a world starved for spirit, people will feed on anything that glows. You see it in false prophecy. Influencers selling downloads of destiny wrapped in curated filters. You see it in modern ascension circles that feel more like MLMs and mystery schools. You see it in the new temples built on screens, sound baths, and AI assisted channeled light codes with no discernment, no ground, no gatekeeping of truth. It's all light coded, but it's not all light aligned, because mimicry isn't just misdirection, it's a form of possession. When something holy is duplicated for gain, it hollows out the original and installs a spirit of substitution. That is why discernment isn't a luxury, it's a survival tool. In a world of inverted temples, your fire is your filter, because not everything that glows is divine. Some things shine because they're burning you slowly and calling it bliss. We like to think inversion lives in the past. Ancient temples, forgotten rites, buried sites under layers of ash and ivy. But inverted thresholds are alive and well, and you walk past them every day. Some are still called cathedrals, stone giants humming with dissonance after centuries of stolen ritual and blood-soaked consecration. Some are screens lit up with algorithms, pulling your soul through the veil with every scroll and every suggested portal of entertainment, desire, despair. And some are stages, designed like temples, complete with lights, chants, rhythmic movements, and an altar called celebrity. These modern thresholds don't need permission. They just need your attention, because wherever your focus lingers, that's where your fire flows. And where your fire flows is where new structures are built. You think you're watching, but something's watching you. Because not all portals are opened on purpose. Some are opened by design. And in this age, design is everywhere. Architects of frequency, builders of distraction, engineers of consent. They're not trying to keep you out of sacred space. They're trying to invert it. So you enter willingly, thinking you're being uplifted when really you're being harvested. Not all thresholds are built of stone. Not all gates creak on hinges. Some are woven through your very being. You have walked through doors you don't remember, agreements you didn't know you made, crossroads you didn't recognize until years later when something inside you whispered, "You turned here." That's when it changed. Your spirit is an architecture. There are chambers, stairways, vaults of memory, and there are gates, some wide open, some sealed for lifetimes. Some were never yours to carry, but here's the secret. Not all that stands at your gate is sacred. Sometimes a threshold appears to test you, to ask, are you still asleep? Do you know whose hand is on the latch? Every trauma, every betrayal etches new lines in the corridors of your soul, but also every act of courage, every act of truth builds new doors. Doors you will one day walk through when you are ready to return to yourself. Because there's a gate you came here to reopen, a sacred one, older than this life, older than fear, and it lives in you. Every true threshold once had a guardian, a watcher, a presence that did not open the gate lightly. In ancient days, it was understood to pass through a sacred doorway, you had to be witnessed, measured, prepared. That wasn't control. That was alignment. Because a threshold without a guardian isn't just vulnerable, it's an invitation for inversion. Now, some watchers still remain at the base of old stairwells and forgotten cathedrals, at forest gates the modern eye no longer sees, in dreams where you meet a silent figure who says nothing but blocks your path until your spirit steadies. These are not here to dominate, they are here to keep the current clean. But when the watchers are stripped away, when the gate is unguarded, anything can come through. And it has. That's why so many inversion temples have grown in power, why mimicry has replaced mystery, why the spiritual market is loud, but the holy is quiet. We forgot the watchers, and the thresholds forgot us. So, what now? If the temples were inverted, if the gates were breached, if the power was hijacked, what can be done? We reclaim the sacred, not through noise, not through spectacle, but through a return to real alignment. You become the watcher, you become the gate. This isn't metaphor, this is protocol. Before you open your spirit to a teaching, ask, does this feed my ego or fortify my soul? Before you step into a spiritual space, ask, do I feel witnessed or drained? Before you commit your energy, ask, am I being initiated or extracted from? These questions are the new guardians. They stand where the old ones once stood. And with each soul who chooses clarity over craving, truth over trend, fire over flattery, the gate reestablishes, one person at a time. You don't need to rebuild the whole temple. Just become a threshold no inversion can pass. This is how we uninvert the sacred. One remembered watcher, one guarded soul at a time. The thresholds are everywhere. Some are stone, some are story, some are carved into your memory, the doorway you walked through when you first saw the world wasn't what it seemed. But not every door deserves to be opened. Not every gate is sacred just because it's old, and not every temple still holds the light. We live in a time when the sacred has been copied, inverted, and sold, but the true flame can't be replicated. It burns where alignment lives. So, as we leave this episode, I invite you to ask not what's beyond the next threshold, but whether the fire you carry is ready for it. Because the flame knows, and the inverted cannot hold it. Until next time, guard your spirit, walk with truth, and carry the fire.